Good evening, this is the newsroom for today, Monday, May 25th, 2020. We're broadcasting to you on E1, Scar TV, NTN, and Tarzi TV in Bartica. We also welcome our viewers watching on Facebook. My name is Neil Marks and we're outside the Artichon Conference Center where we're covering the national vote recount, which ended the 20th as we speak today. Just over 80 boxes were counted today, bringing the total to 1,206 of the 2,339 boxes that have to be counted. Now, this process is due to end on Saturday. So if you can do a quick calculation, you'd realize that just about half the amount of boxes have been counted, and it looks likely that that deadline will have to be extended. But the Guyana Elections Commission has made no decision on a new date. The Commission met this afternoon. It could not also decide on whether there will be additional recount stations. District number 5 was completed today, moving the count to regions number 8 and 9, with the 2 workstations that were assigned to region 5 no longer in use because that district was completed. Now, the Guyana Chamber of Commerce and Industry has been one of the local observers to this process. So this evening we can begin our conversation with Nicholas Boyd, the president of the association. Nicholas, thank you for coming out and joining us.
My pleasure, Neil. Happy to be here and discuss the statement that we issued this afternoon.
Yeah, so first, could you get into that? One of the things you talked about is the fact that the count for District 4 is going slowly.
Right, so if you permit me a little bit of a lengthy opening statement. The Chamber has been involved as an observer for the March 2nd general elections for months now. And one of the things that now that we've gotten to the recount that we saw and wanted to make note of was the speed at which District 4 was going. As you mentioned in your opening statement, overall we're at about 50%. District 4, we're about 30%. And District 4 is a large district. You have 879 boxes and it has the most electors. So we were concerned with the speed at which District 4 is going, and we put out that statement today calling for additional stations to be put towards District 4 so that we can move a little faster on District 4. Some of the remaining districts have a smaller number of boxes as well as a smaller number of votes per box. So it makes sense to have more stations and have those stations allocated to District 4. Obviously, we see things blowing past that 25-day timeline that was originally given in the order. And we hope that the CARICOM team stays in place and continues their supervision of this recount exercise.
Now, Nicholas, could you talk about some of the observations that you've noted for yourself?
Right, and so the second part of our statement dealt with some of the observations. And one of the first things I want to put out there is that since we were observing on Election Day or E-Day, there was nothing that we saw that was material that would discredit the results of the elections on E-Day. What we maintained that we saw that was questionable was the tabulation of District 4's results, not using SOPs but using a spreadsheet. Outside of that tabulation of Region 4's results, everything else that we witnessed up to that point and the events at the Ashman's building were lent a credible election and a free and fair process. And we had observers that were stationed in the various polling places, some who roved across varying polling places. So we had a good mix and a good combination to get information, and we worked with the Private Sector Commission. Just for a quick thing, we are the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce. The Private Sector Commission is kind of an umbrella body where other business services, organizations such as manufacturers get together and sit down. So we had national coverage through the PSC. Now, coming back to what you're talking about, which is specifically what have we been observing at the recount. We've been local observers to this recount process from day one. Again, we've coordinated with the PSC. I can tell you that what we've seen was a number of objections, I would say, being raised at each station by APNU AFC party agents or counting agents. But at each time those objections were raised, we saw no sort of evidence being presented and they were noted as allegations. Initially, before the commission started to look at how to capture it, they were being treated as almost as material facts. But then it is decided that it should not be recorded as a material fact, as no evidence it wasn't being tried in a court of law. It was just someone getting up and saying, and how it happens, because I realize it's probably good for me to go through the process of what you see when you actually sit down in a workstation. So when you sit down in a workstation, what happens is there's this beautiful process where a ballot box is brought in with a very tight chain of custody. There's signatures for receipt to the ballot boxes. It's being transported with party agents and police officers. Gets to the workstation. At the workstation, you have GECOM staff, supervisors, party counting agents, local observers like ourselves, and you get the roving international observers who are the OAS and CARICOM, right? So what happens is when you open that box, they start to take out the envelopes that are inside those boxes. GECOM has a particular system of numbering these envelopes, and they contain various bits of information from what is called the folios. And a folio is part official list of electors, but it also has more information than just the OLE has. It has a photo ID, it has the photo that is on the ID of that person. So for instance, on the folio where I vote, you would find, and this folio is issued to presiding officers as well as polling agents and party agents on E-Day. And so you would have that folio, and so it would have my photo that's on my national ID, and my particulars, and then the other information is on the OLE, right? So in the boxes, you have those folios, you have some amount of, let's say, accounting information for what's in the box. You have the counterfoils of the ballots that were issued, and you have the ballots themselves, right? So the process that goes on is that there's some amount of setup time where the GECOM agents go through those materials in the envelopes, and then they start the actual count. After they're finished with the actual count, they then take note of any observations. I think so far the weirdest one we've seen was a mix-up of two sets of folios. So in one polling place, there were multiple polling stations, right? Because they tried to keep a certain volume of voters per station so that you don't have long queuing. And within a place, one station's folios was mixed up with the other. Other than that, we've not seen anything material that speaks to coordinated efforts to, change or affect the outcome of the elections. Now going back, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but going back to what we've seen in the boxes. So after they've done a lot of these counts of the votes and they tally up, and so far most of what we've seen matches with the SOPs that we have had in our records, where we had copies of SOPs or photos of SOPs sent us. And then you get the APNO FC agents, they get up and make these objections that people have, at first the wording was people have migrated, had voted, and then that wording was changed to people were not in the jurisdiction but listed as having voted on that day. And usually what happens, they come and read out these serial numbers from the folio, and you would find a majority of the serial numbers that they're reading out were not ticked off, meaning that what ticked off means is on election day you have the presiding officers. Let the sirens pass. That's interesting.
We'll get to that in a minute.
So you have the presiding officers and the party agents. They would take the folios and they would strike off the names of the persons who were coming in, right? And so it's listed that, okay, this elected voted, and then you obviously go and vote and you dip your finger in ink. So that's kind of the check and balance to see who voted on that list, right? So the APNO FC agent would get up and just call these serial numbers, and maybe 3 or 4 may hit that they were ticked off. But the issue here is that in the context of the recount, in the context of what matters based on the representation of the People's Act, the folio is it doesn't have a true legal basis to change or impact the outcome. It's a nice to have. Maybe in the future it's something that should be looked at in terms of strengthening the electoral process. But going back to what you see these APNU AFC agents getting up to make these objections, and then I think only once I've seen the issue surrounding that a deceased, someone voted in the name of a deceased person. The issue there, that the first time we saw that, was that there are two persons with a similar name, and of course our death certificates are very loose. Yeah? They don't have a lot of information that you can actually tie back that it was that person, the first person on that list, or the second person with a similar name on that list. So all in all, we haven't seen anything that was materially done to affect the outcome of the elections or change the will of the people, if you have it.
Today there was a statement from the campaign manager of APNU plus AFC talking about over 80,000 votes being being called into question because of what they observed during this process. Is that fair?
So based on our observations, I would say it's not fair. Why is because again, and what I want to say is, I know I'm going to be accused tomorrow of a lot of it being interjecting. This is not personal opinion. This is based on the observers we fielded, their reports. Our observers are of all different hues. I'm sure, I would guess, because we've never talked about it, different political persuasions. Everybody reported based on what they saw and in the spirit of patriotism, right? Because they wanted to see an election process completed and one that they could be proud of. And that formed the basis of why we're making the statements. Because I've seen GECOM staff working hard on E-Day. I've seen them working hard in the recount process. Long hours, tireless days. And it's unfair to call, their hard work into question on claims that I can say at this point we have not witnessed. And I mean, I'd use the word spurious.
Nicholas, just finally, if you were to make a decision in your head, how many workstations do you think needs to be added here to get this process out of the way? Even hazarding a guess, what will it take to speed this process up in your mind?
To be fair, Neil, I'd say that's a fair question. I'd say I would ask for as many as is safe, because obviously we're under a COVID-19 situation. But I think...
But you go in there, do you see space?
If at least we could get maybe 3 to 4 more stations focused on this count. And let me digress 1 second. The Chamber of Commerce is particularly interested in the result, I won't say the result, but getting to a result. Because the lack of having a result, the lack of having a government that's fully empowered in place is hampering business. Is hampering the COVID-19 response, and we're suffering an economic downturn as a result of the virus's effects and social distancing measures, as well as when you go into an election year in a third world country, you have a slowdown in investment because people are all waiting to see the outcome of the election. So this process going on for 80 plus days has had an impact on business and volume of transactions and business deals that are going on. So we're particularly interested in seeing that the process comes to an end.
Thank you very much, Nicholas.
No problem. Take care.
Nicholas Boyer, the president of the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, speaking with us there. We'll have much more on the national vote recount and other news just after the break. Welcome back. You're watching the newsroom live from the Artichoke Conference Center on the east coast of Demerara, where the national vote recount is taking place. We want to bring you a bit of news from inside the center. Just before we took the break, you may have heard sirens in the background. That was of an ambulance and a fire tender going into the conference center. We understand that the elevator inside the facility malfunctioned and that there's someone stuck inside the elevator. Now, the Artichoke Conference Center just has 2 floors really, but there is an elevator that could take you up and down to the 2nd floor. So we understand that this man, we don't know who he is, was stuck inside the elevator. So the fire tender and the ambulance has just arrived at the facility if we get a further update before the end of the newscast, we'll be sure to bring you that. We want to turn now to comments from Chairman, or rather the campaign manager of APNU Plus AFC, Mr. Joseph Harmon, because today he issued a statement again claiming that APNU Plus AFC had won the elections, but in the same breath saying that the results cannot be credible because there was widespread electoral fraud. APNU Plus AFC is so far claiming that over 86,000 votes are in question because of what it claims is this electoral fraud. So we can turn to his comments now.
Now, in a document which we circulated yesterday, deemed qualitative irregularities and votes lacking credibility, we have discovered that after reviewing over 699 of these boxes, that the qualitative irregularities that we found amounted to over 86,367 votes. These show that the dead voted, the out-of-country voted, missing poll books, affidavit of identity is not signed, etc. And it points to a systematic undermining of the GECOM process and fraud on the Guyanese population. Our investigations have revealed that as at the 22nd day of May 2020, the electoral theft and scheme is unraveling, and 86,367 votes cannot be explained or accounted for. This directly goes to the credibility of these elections. These unaccounted votes are evidence of a fraudulent attempt to steal the elections, suppress the will of the majority of the Guyanese people who voted for the APNU AFC. We anticipate as the days go by, we will find more of these anomalies and we continue to highlight them. But make no mistake, the APNU AFC coalition has been and remains confident that we were successful at the polls. We, however, must stay focused on the validity of each vote, which gives credibility to the entire process. We cannot allow electoral fraud by the PPP to prevail over our democratic process.
The campaign manager of APNU Plus AFC, Joseph Harmon, speaking there. Now on Sunday, a team from a new and united Guyana toured the Artachon Conference Center. The team was led by Ralph Ramkaran, the presidential candidate of that party for the March 2nd elections. Mr. Ramkaran, a former Speaker of the House, who led Guyana's constitutional reform process, which ended in 2000 with several reforms to the Constitution, said that the claims being made by APNU Plus AFC cannot be investigated by the Guyana Elections Commission. He said that the commission is not designed as a trial body and so cannot accept any sort of evidence that persons who may have died or who may have migrated or were not in the jurisdiction were marked off as having voted in those March 2nd elections. That's the claim APNU Plus AFC is making, but Mr. Ramkaran saying that GECOM cannot accept any evidence from anyone regarding those claims, saying that those matters belong to an elections petition.
Former Speaker of the National Assembly Ralph Ramkaran said the allegations of dead and migrated persons voting in the March 2nd elections need to be dealt with in an elections petition. The claims are being made by the incumbent APNU AFC during the ongoing recount. Ramkaran, a legal giant in Guyana who led the constitutional reform process at the turn of the century, said that all GECOM can do when those objections are made is to acknowledge it with a thank you.
It must be, the commission is not constructed to accommodate a trial, to accommodate an investigatory process to determine whether those allegations are true or not. Quite apart from that, the law requires that these matters be raised at an election petition. The Commission has started, they have allowed these objections to be raised, and it's probably too late for the Commission to say, look, we're not going to take any more objections. But they should not have accepted these objections from the beginning. They should have said, take your objections, record your objections, and take them to the election petition court. And I think the objections are one reason why the process is taking so long.
Ramkran, who is also the presidential candidate for a new and united Guyana, made these comments during an engagement with the press after visiting the Arthur Chong Conference Center on Sunday, where the recount is ongoing. He said the objections at this point are slowing up the recount process. Given the allegations, concerns have been raised whether the recount results will be used to declare a winner. To this, Ramkaran said GECOM cannot revert to the 10 declarations made by the returning officers following the March 2nd elections, as those declarations also came from the same votes being recounted now.
It is not possible for GECOM to order a recount under the Election Laws Amendment Act, and at the end of the process to abandon a declaration of that recount and then return to the count and issue a declaration based on the report which has been made to GECOM by the Chief Election Officer in relation to his invitation to make a declaration. Why? The allegation is that these elections are deeply flawed because of dead and migrated people having voted. If GECOM were to take the position that these elections, that under the recount process, that these allegations have made it untenable for a declaration to be issued, then that declaration will be equally untenable under the count, because the same votes which were made, which are being counted in this recount, are the same votes which were made under the count.
According to the recount order, the Commission shall, after deliberating on a report from the Chief Elections Officer, determine whether it should request the CEO to use the data compiled as basis for the submission of a report to ascertain the winner of the election. It is Ramkaran's hope that the recount results will be accepted by all competitors. At the end of Sunday, GECOM recounted 1,124 ballot boxes of the 2,339 boxes to be counted. Baby Katoon, Newsroom.